It's clear that the Winter Olympics in Beijing simply had to provoke a new information campaign on the Uyghur issue. The Olympians carried the fire, and at the same time, Western mass media repeated the same old lines: millions repressed, slave labor of prisoners, and so on. It's got to the point of insanity. US officials in all seriousness demanded that Beijing provide evidence that the Olympic uniform of the Chinese team was created without the participation of the Uyghurs, and the Olympic facilities were built without involving prisoners from the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. And since Beijing didn't respond to this demand, this is what US official Jen Psaki said.
The Biden administration will not send any diplomatic or official representation to the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics and Paralympic Games, given the PRC's ongoing genocide and crimes against humanity in Xinjiang and other human rights abuses. The athletes on Team USA have our full support. We will be behind them 100% as we cheer them on from home, but we will not be contributing to the fanfare of the Games. U.S. diplomatic or official representation would treat these Games as business as usual in the face of the PRC's egregious human rights abuses and atrocities in Xinjiang, and we simply can't do that. As the President has told President Xi, standing up for human rights is in the DNA of Americans. We have a fundamental commitment to promoting human rights, and we feel strongly in our position, and we will continue to take actions to advance human rights in China and beyond.
I suspect the decision would still be the same, even if China had provided some sort of evidence. Washington would consider them and then say it's insufficient and unconvincing. Therefore, China decided not to send any information, since it's quite clear to the unbiased observer that the Uyghur issue is not about caring for the Uyghurs, but about the consistent anti-Chinese policy of Washington and its allies in this direction. Sadly, a lot of people have fallen into this trap. The West doesn't care about the Uyghurs. Come on, think about it. This is the same Western media which calls every single other Muslim out there a terrorist. The West doesn't care about the Uyghur issue, and sadly, neither does the Muslim world, because they didn't help the Uyghurs when they needed it the most. UN official Michelle Bachelet will visit Xinjiang on a study visit. A report on the situation of the Uyghurs will be published after all activities relating to the Olympics are over. You see folks, Xinjiang has always been a problematic region for China. Economic backwardness, poverty, and low level of education, separatism, and extremism. These are its characteristic features that have survived until the early 2000s. By the way, local extremists by this time had already begun to actively integrate into the global so-called jihad network, having established close ties with people like Daesh and Al-Qaeda, as we saw them in Syria and Iraq.
International terrorist forces are influencing ETIM, which has embraced the ideology of violent jihad. Members of ETIM outside China are active in Syria. They have worked with Al-Qaeda in Iraq and Syria.
If we look back in history, back during the 2008 Beijing Olympics, the Islamic Party of Turkestan, the TIP, launched a video on the internet with an appeal that said, "We, the members of the TIP, have declared war on China. We oppose China's occupation of our homeland, East Turkestan, which is part of the Islamic world. Please do not be near the Chinese in the same building, in the same store, or in the same bus, or on the same train. Please don't fly with the Chinese on the same plane." In Beijing, this was taken very seriously, since a month earlier TIP commander Saifullah claimed responsibility for several terrorist attacks in China, and the Chinese answer was quite harsh. Punitive measures against extremists and separatists were taken, as well as their accomplices. Now, I don't want to sugarcoat the situation. I don't want to claim that everything that was done by the Chinese was 100% legal and not a single innocent person was harmed, but China had to resort to extreme measures, all thanks to these extremists. The Chinese leadership understood one thing, which many in the West just don't get, and that is extremism has socio-economic roots, and that's why from the very beginning of the Belt and Road Initiative, China gave Xinjiang one of the key places. However, people in the Western world, they just don't get it. When people in the West shout that Beijing is resettling over 300,000 Chinese to Xinjiang to the detriment of the local population, one must understand that specialists are sent there. I've been speaking to a few Indian students in Xinjiang who have confirmed that these Chinese people who are being resettled are professionals. They're engineers of all specialities, IT specialists, railway workers, and energy workers. When people in the West shout that in Xinjiang they're forced to study Chinese, one must understand, if the Uyghurs don't study Chinese, they will simply be uncompetitive in the labour market and will not be able to get a decent job, and they will simply not be able to master those technical innovations that are actively implemented all across China. If China doesn't help the Uyghurs, then who will? And what's the alternative? Leave Xinjiang in utter poverty and its population, the Uyghurs, so beloved to the West, left without prospects or a decent life, in eternal poverty, and then used in war zones across the globe? I don't know. I hope someone can answer this question. The rhetoric of the Western liberals and Yankee jihadists on the Uyghur issue is pretty much the same. They accuse, make up false stories and over-dramatize incidents, but these people have no answer at all to the growing problems in Xinjiang, and that's because they don't want a solution to the problem. They want the problem to linger. They want the Uyghurs to be used against China for their own political or religious agenda, which is totally insane and unfair.